I had never imagined that a single phone call would shatter everything I believed about my family. It began on a cool Thursday morning when the sun barely peeked through my curtains. I was drinking my usual cup of tea when my phone rang, displaying my son Daniel's name on the screen. He rarely called, so my heart danced with excitement. I answered quickly, expecting warmth in his voice, but instead he spoke in a rushed tone, telling me that his wife Emily had gone into labor and that the doctors expected the baby to arrive within hours. He didn't ask how I was, and he didn't sound happy to share the news. Still, the thought of meeting my first grandson made my heart swell so much that I didn't care. He told me the hospital and then abruptly ended the call with a soft "okay, bye." I booked the fastest ticket I could find. 12 hours on a bus was long, uncomfortable, and exhausting, but every minute felt worth it because I believed I was going to witness the moment my grandson entered the world. During the ride, I kept imagining holding him, studying his little fingers, kissing the top of his soft head, and whispering blessings into his ears. I imagined Daniel smiling the way he used to when he was a boy, running into my arms after school. I imagined Emily thanking me for coming so far. I imagined joy, connection, family. I didn't imagine pain. I didn't imagine humiliation. I didn't imagine the coldness that would greet me like a blow to my chest. When I arrived at the hospital, tired but ready, I asked the receptionist for Emily's room. The nurse directed me down a long corridor lined with pastel-colored walls. My heart raced with excitement. I walked quickly, clutching the handles of my small suitcase. When I found the room, I knocked softly and opened the door, only to see Daniel standing near Emily's bed, his face stiff. Emily looked pale but calm, her hair tied back, her eyes closed as she breathed through another contraction. I stepped inside, whispering, "I'm here, sweetheart." I made it. But Daniel didn't smile. Instead, he stepped closer to me and said, "Mom, wait outside for a moment." I stood still, confused. "Is everything all right?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. He inhaled deeply and then said words that stung harshly. "Emily wants only her family inside. She doesn't want other people. She needs privacy." Emily didn't open her eyes, but I noticed the slight tightening in her jaw. I felt heat flush through my face. "Other people?" I repeated. "Daniel, I'm your mother." He looked away as if ashamed, but he continued coldly, "Mom, please, don't make this harder. Just wait outside. She's already stressed." I wanted to protest, but something told me that if I pushed, the situation might get worse, so I stepped out of the room. My heart beat painfully as the door closed behind me. Through the small window on the door, I saw Daniel go back to Emily's side, holding her hand gently. That image felt like a knife twisting inside my chest. I wanted to cry, but I forced myself to sit on one of the chairs in the hallway. I waited there for nearly 4 hours. Nurses walked past, doctors hurried by, families laughed or cried in groups. But no one spoke to me. Eventually, Daniel came out again. His expression was conflicted, but his voice was firm. "Mom," he said quietly, "don't push to come inside. Emily, she feels uncomfortable. She never wanted you here, honestly. She says it stresses her out." My lips trembled. "Daniel." "I traveled 12 hours. He shrugged slightly and looked away, as though that meant nothing. He whispered, "I can't fight with her right now. Just go back home. I'll call you when the baby is born." Then he walked back inside without waiting for my response. I felt the world collapse around me. My legs felt weak. My eyes blurred with tears, but I swallowed them back, refusing to cry in front of strangers. I stood, picked up my suitcase, and left the hospital without saying a single word. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text anyone. I didn't cry until I reached my hotel room. That night, I sobbed into my pillow like I hadn't cried since my husband passed away. 3 days passed without a single message from Daniel. Not even a "Mom, the baby arrived." Nothing. The silence was louder than any argument we had ever had. On the third morning, however, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a nurse from the maternity ward greeted me. "Ma'am," she said politely, "I'm calling regarding payment issues. There seems to be an outstanding hospital fee of $10,000 associated with Emily's delivery. You are listed as the responsible party." I felt my jaw drop. "Excuse me? I didn't authorize anything. Why would I be responsible?" The nurse checked the file and read aloud. "It says here that the patient's mother-in-law, meaning you, agreed to cover all medical expenses." My breath caught in my throat. I whispered, "I never said such a thing." The nurse apologized, but the hospital still needed clarification. I hung up and immediately tried calling Daniel, but he didn't answer. I called again. No reply. Then I sent him a message. "The hospital says I owe $10,000. What is happening?" He replied 5 minutes later with a text so cold it made my chest ache. "Mom, you said you'd help. Emily is stressed. Please don't bother her. Just pay it." I stared at the words in disbelief. I typed back trembling. "I never agreed. Why would you put me down as responsible?" His response came quickly. "Mom, don't make a scene. You're always dramatic. Just do your job as a parent." My job as a parent, after I raised him alone for years. After I sacrificed everything to send him to college. After I worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. After I sold my jewelry so he could pay his tuition. That message shattered me in a way nothing had before. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The next day the hospital called again. The bill was still outstanding and they needed a definite answer. I told them clearly that I never signed anything and would not be paying a bill I didn't authorize. The hospital understood and said they would update the file. I felt embarrassed but relieved. Later that evening, Daniel finally called. His tone was sharp. "Mom, you humiliated us," he said. I felt a surge of anger. "Daniel," I said firmly, "I didn't humiliate anyone. You put my name without permission. You lied." He sighed loudly. "Emily is upset. She thinks you're selfish. Honestly, you should have been more supportive." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Daniel, your wife refused to let me see the baby. She kicked me out of the room. You didn't defend me, and now you want me to pay $10,000? He stayed silent for a long moment before whispering, "Emily said she won't allow you near the baby until you fix this. Fix this." As if I had created the mess. I hung up, not out of rudeness but because I felt my heart breaking and I didn't want him to hear my voice crack. The next several days were heavy. I found myself questioning everything, my parenting, my sacrifices, my worth. I spent my evenings staring at old photographs of Daniel when he was young. Photos where he clung to my hand, where he cried into my shoulder, where he fell asleep with his head on my chest. Photos where his eyes held love. I wondered when that love had faded, or if it had ever been real. 2 weeks passed, and I didn't reach out again. I told myself that if Daniel wanted to reconcile, he would call. But he never did. Then, one afternoon, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. It simply said, "This is Emily's mother. We need to talk. It's about Daniel." My chest tightened. I hesitated, then called back. Emily's mother answered, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately. "I didn't know they listed you for the hospital bill. I didn't know Daniel barred you from the delivery room. I didn't know what he has been saying about you." I felt confused. "What do you mean?" I asked softly. She hesitated before continuing. "Daniel told us that you abandoned him when he was young. He said you were irresponsible, that you forced him to live with relatives, that you refused to help him financially." Emily believed him. That's why she didn't want you near her during labor. My mouth fell open. "What?" I whispered. That's not true. None of that is true." She sighed shakily. "I know. I found out yesterday when I saw old documents in Emily's drawer. Daniel had hidden them. There were photos, school forms with your signature, tuition receipts. All proof that you raised him alone and supported him. My head spun. Daniel had lied about me. He had rewritten history. Emily's mother continued in a voice thick with regret. Emily confronted him last night. He admitted it. He said he lied because he didn't want Emily to compare you to her own mother. He thought you were too involved, and that it would cause tension. So he painted you as the problem. I sat down slowly, tears stinging behind my eyes. Why? Why would he do that? I don't know, she whispered, but I want you to know the truth. And I want you to know that Emily is devastated. She had no idea Daniel shut you out so cruelly. I didn't speak for several seconds. My throat burned with emotion. Finally I whispered, "Thank you for telling me," she continued, her voice softer now. "Emily wants to meet you. She wants to apologize. She wants you to see the baby." The tears spilled before I could stop them. We set a time to meet at a small cafe near my home. The next morning I arrived early, my stomach in knots. When Emily walked in holding the baby in a soft blanket, she looked fragile and regretful. She sat across from me and placed the baby gently in my arms. He was tiny, warm, beautiful. A soft tuft of hair, pink cheeks, tiny fingers curling around mine. My heart melted instantly. Emily whispered, "I'm so sorry. I judged you without knowing anything. Daniel lied, and I let his words shape my feelings. I hope you can forgive me." I nodded slowly. "It wasn't your fault. You believed the man you love." A tear rolled down her face. "He shouldn't have done this. And he shouldn't have treated you the way he did at the hospital. I didn't know he told you to leave. We talked for an hour." She apologized again and again. She told me the truth stunned her and that she felt guilty for every cold thought she had had toward me. I forgave her, truly forgave her. Because the anger wasn't for her. It was for Daniel. When Emily left, she told me that she and her family were confronting Daniel and that he would contact me soon. But I didn't wait for him to call. I went home, sat quietly for several hours, and made a decision. A painful one. A necessary one. That evening, when Daniel finally called me, his voice was low and unsteady. "Mom, can we talk?" I inhaled slowly. "Daniel," I said, "I love you. I will always love you, but I need space. I need time. You hurt me deeply, more deeply than you understand. You lied to your wife about our past. You erased years of sacrifice. You humiliated me, disrespected me, and pushed me away in one of the most important moments of my life." He said nothing, only breathed shakily. I continued, my voice trembling but steady. "I am not cutting you off. But I am stepping away. When you are ready to be honest, respectful, and a son again, you can come to me." He whispered a broken, "Mom, please." But I quietly hung up the call. Weeks passed. Then one evening, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Daniel was standing there with tears streaming down his face. He didn't speak. He just fell to his knees and cried. Real, raw, painful tears. The kind he hadn't cried since childhood. I stood still for a moment, then gently placed my hand on his head. It would take time to rebuild what he broke. It would take patience to heal what he damaged. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Because sometimes the deepest cracks in a family reveal where the light can finally enter. Daniel stayed kneeling on my doorstep longer than I expected, his shoulders shaking with each silent sob. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to pull him up, hold him tightly, and tell him everything was okay. Another part of me wanted to step back and close the door, because some wounds still felt too fresh and too deep to forget. But when he finally lifted his face to look at me, his eyes red and swollen, I saw not the man who had spoken cold words to me in a hospital hallway, but the young boy who used to run to me after scraping his knee, crying because he trusted I could fix anything. And that memory softened something inside me. I whispered for him to stand up. His legs trembled as he rose. For a moment, we stood there, mother and son, the evening breeze brushing against us, the streetlight glowing softly above. He didn't know whether to hug me or keep his distance, so he simply stood still, waiting for me to decide. I stepped aside and motioned for him to come inside. He exhaled shakily, almost with relief, and walked in. I closed the door quietly behind him. He stood awkwardly in the living room, as though he were a stranger in a house he grew up in. I noticed how tired he looked, dark circles under his eyes, unshaven face, messy hair. He looked like someone who had not slept properly in weeks. I gestured toward the couch and told him to sit. He obeyed silently. I brought him a glass of water and placed it on the table. He was gripping his hands together tightly, his fingers trembling, as though he feared they might betray him. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "Mom, I'm sorry." The words were small, fragile, and shaky, but they carried a weight I couldn't ignore. I didn't answer immediately. I sat across from him, waiting for him to continue. He swallowed hard before adding, "Everything that happened. I know it can't be undone, but I want to explain. I want to tell you the truth." I kept my expression neutral, though inside my heart was beating fast. He ran a shaking hand over his face. "Emily, she came from a close family, very close. Her parents are always together, always supporting her. When we got engaged, she would compare us sometimes. She'd say things like, 'Your mom must have been such a big support when you were growing up.' I didn't know how to explain our past without sounding weak, without admitting that we struggled. I didn't want her to think less of me because of the life we had before I made something of myself." He paused, looking down at his hands. "I should have been proud. You did everything for me. But instead, I let shame twist things inside me." His voice broke. "I was afraid Emily would think I wasn't good enough compared to her family. So I made our past sound more distant. Then one lie became another, and suddenly I had created a whole story where you were the problem. And I kept it going because I didn't know how to undo it." He finally looked up at me, tears flooding his eyes. "I'm not asking you to forgive me today. I want you to know the truth. I want to fix this. I want to rebuild everything I broke." His words cut me deeply because they were honest. Painfully honest. I leaned back slowly, staring at the son I raised, wondering how the child who once clung to me for comfort had grown into a man so afraid of his own truth that he erased me from it. I spoke softly, choosing each word carefully. "Daniel, shame makes us hide, fear makes us lie. But those lies hurt the people who love us the most. I'm glad you're telling the truth now. It matters." A tear rolled down his cheek. "Mom, I didn't realize how much I hurt you until Emily confronted me. She cried for hours. She said she couldn't believe I made you look like someone who didn't care. And when she showed me the documents you left behind for me, the things from my childhood, I don't know. Something broke inside me." He took a shaky breath. "I thought about all the nights you stayed up sewing clothes for money. The times you walked me to school because we couldn't afford the bus. The nights you went hungry so I could eat. Everything you gave up. Everything you did alone. And I realized I betrayed the only person who ever stood by me." Hearing him say that triggered a pain I had been bearing for weeks. My voice trembled as I spoke. "Daniel, I waited outside that hospital room for hours. I waited because I believed I mattered to you. I believed you wanted me there. When you told me to leave, it felt like you cut something inside me. And when you put that hospital bill on me, I couldn't understand how my son could treat me that way." He covered his face with his hands, sobbing harder. I know, Mom. I was stupid. I was scared. I thought if I asked you for help after pushing you away, you'd turn me down. So I put your name because I panicked and didn't know what else to do. I wasn't thinking. I was desperate. But you didn't deserve that. You didn't deserve any of it." His shame was real. His regret was real. And suddenly I realized something. Healing wasn't going to happen through a single apology. Healing would come through actions, through his willingness to change. We sat in silence for a long moment. The only sound was the clock ticking and Daniel's quiet breathing as he tried to calm down. I didn't rush to comfort him. I wanted him to feel the weight of his actions, not because I wanted him to suffer, but because real growth only comes from facing the truth completely. Finally, I stood and walked to the kitchen. I made tea, something simple, something familiar, something that had always soothed us both. When I brought 2 cups back, he looked surprised, almost hopeful. I placed 1 cup in front of him before sitting down again. We drank in silence for a few minutes. It wasn't comfortable silence, but it wasn't hostile either. It was the kind of silence where 2 people try to find a path back to each other. Daniel eventually took a deep breath and whispered, "Mom, Emily wants you in the baby's life. She said she feels guilty and ashamed. She told me she wants you to be involved in everything. She wants the baby to know his grandmother." I felt something warm inside me, something fragile and tender. "I'm glad," I whispered. "The baby is innocent. He deserves love from everyone." Daniel nodded slowly. "I named him Noah," he added quietly. "Emily and we wanted you to know that. We wanted to tell you earlier." Hearing the baby's name for the first time felt like someone opened a window in a dark room. "Noah," I repeated softly, "is beautiful." Daniel wiped his eyes. "Mom, I want to show you his nursery, and his pictures. And everything. If you're ready." I nodded gently. "I'm ready to see pictures. The rest we'll take slowly." He immediately pulled out his phone and began scrolling through images. Noah swaddled in a blanket. Noah sleeping, Noah yawning, Noah wrapped in Emily's arms. Each picture tugged at my heart. I found myself smiling despite everything. "He looks like you did as a baby," I whispered. Daniel smiled weakly. "Emily says the same." We continued talking for hours. Daniel told me he was starting therapy to understand why he felt the need to lie about his past. He told me he wanted to rebuild trust. He told me he wanted to be better for himself, for Emily, for Noah, and for me. When he finally stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Mom, can I hug you?" His voice trembled with fear that I might say no. I nodded and opened my arms. He stepped into my embrace and held me tightly, the way he used to when he was little. I felt his tears soak into my shoulder. I held him too, not because everything was forgiven, but because healing had to start somewhere. When he finally pulled away, he wiped his face. "Emily wants to visit with Noah tomorrow. If you're okay with it." I felt my heart flutter. "Yes," I whispered. "I like that very much." He smiled softly, a small, shy smile I hadn't seen since his teenage years. Then he left. The moment the door closed, I sat down slowly and let out a shaky breath. I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and peace. The road ahead would not be simple. It would require patience, boundaries, conversations, and time. But for the first time since everything broke apart, I felt the possibility of healing. The next day, when Emily arrived with baby Noah, I opened the door with a nervous heart. She looked humble, holding Noah close. Her eyes were red, as though she had been crying too. Without saying a word, she stepped forward and hugged me gently. It wasn't a dramatic hug. It wasn't forced. It was sincere. She whispered, "Thank you for giving us another chance." I held her hand and gently touched Noah's small cheek. "Families break," I whispered. "But they can be rebuilt if everyone is willing." Emily smiled tearfully. "We are willing." As Noah opened his tiny eyes and stared up at me for the first time, something in me healed. Not completely, but enough to take the next step. And sometimes, one step is all you need to start walking toward a future where love can grow again, stronger, wiser, and real. The first day Noah came into my home changed something inside me. It wasn't loud or emotional or dramatic. It was quiet, gentle, almost sacred. Emily carefully placed him into my arms, and the moment his tiny warmth touched my chest, my breath hitched. His small fingers curled instinctively around the fabric of my shirt, and I felt the weight of generations in that touch. It felt as though life had handed me a new beginning wrapped in a tiny blanket. Emily sat close, watching nervously, almost afraid I wouldn't connect with him. But she didn't need to worry. The love I felt in that moment was instant and pure, untouched by anything that had happened before. Daniel stood behind her silently, his eyes soft, his posture humble, as though he didn't want to intrude on a moment he believed he didn't deserve to witness. Noah blinked up at me, his eyes a deep shade of brown, Daniel's childhood eyes, and something in me melted completely. I whispered softly to him, telling him he was loved, that he was safe, that his grandmother was right here and would always be here. Emily wiped a tear quietly, and Daniel turned his face away to hide his emotion. We spent hours talking that afternoon. Daniel and Emily updated me on Noah's feeding schedule, the funny way he sneezed multiple times in a row, the way he loved listening to soft humming. I found myself laughing with them, something I hadn't imagined happening so soon. For a brief moment, we were a family again, imperfect, bruised, but trying. When they left that evening, they promised to return soon. After the door closed, I held on to Noah's scent on my shirt and allowed myself to enjoy a feeling I had forgotten, hope. Over the next few weeks, they visited often, sometimes every day. Emily would arrive with bags of diapers, baby bottles, little socks, and more pictures of Noah than I could count. Daniel often came straight from work, still in his office clothes, his tie crooked from rushing. And every time he stepped inside, he seemed a little less burdened, a little more at ease, a little more like the boy I raised. He asked me questions about caring for a newborn, as though he were rediscovering motherhood through me, late but sincerely. I taught him how to hold Noah properly, how to calm him when he fussed, how to swaddle him tightly so he felt secure. Daniel listened with full attention, as though my voice mattered again. Sometimes, Emily would step into the kitchen with me while Daniel played with Noah in the living room. She would help me prepare tea, insisting I shouldn't do all the work. Those moments became small windows where she allowed herself to speak honestly. One evening, while warming milk for Noah, she admitted softly, "I know I judged you unfairly. I let Daniel's stories color my perception. But after reading the notes and letters you kept from his childhood, I realized you weren't the distant mother he claimed. You were the only parent who never gave up on him." Her words surprised me. She continued, "I want you to be a part of our life, truly, not because we feel guilty, but because Noah deserves his grandmother. And Daniel deserves to rebuild what he lost." Her sincerity brought a warmth to my chest. I didn't need perfection from them, just effort, honesty, and respect. Emily gave me all three. As the weeks passed, the cracks between us slowly filled in with small gestures, shared moments, and genuine remorse. Daniel apologized more than once, not in a rehearsed way, but with the kind of quiet sincerity that comes from a man who finally understands the consequences of his actions. He told me he had started therapy. He told me he was learning to accept his past instead of hiding it. He told me he wanted Noah to grow up proud of the truth, not some polished story. I saw him change, not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily, like someone rebuilding a house brick by brick. One day, he came to me with a small wrapped box. He handed it to me without saying a word. When I opened it, I found a delicate gold locket inside. On the front was engraved a small N. On the inside was a tiny picture of Noah on one side and a childhood picture of Daniel on the other. My throat tightened. "It's for you," he whispered. "So you always have both your boys close." I didn't speak. Words felt too small for what I felt in that moment. Instead, I hugged him tightly, fully, without hesitation. And he hugged me back with the desperation of someone grateful for a second chance. As my bond with them grew stronger, the bitterness inside me dissolved slowly. I stopped replaying the hurtful words he once spoke at the hospital. I stopped waking up at night with the memory of being pushed away. I stopped feeling like I was an outsider in my own son's life. Instead, I felt like a mother again, not perfect, not without scars, but included, respected, valued. Emily eventually returned to work, and she often asked me to watch Noah during the day. I loved every moment, feeding him, rocking him to sleep, singing soft lullabies, taking him for walks in the garden. Neighbors would stop and admire him, and I felt a sense of pride I hadn't felt in years. Daniel began joining us during his lunch breaks, kissing Noah's head before sitting with me for tea. We talked about simple things: work, weather, baby milestones, normal conversations that made my home feel alive again. One afternoon, after Emily picked Noah up, Daniel lingered behind. He looked nervous, hands in his pockets, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Finally, he spoke. "Mom, Emily and I want to ask you something important." I waited. He took a slow breath. "We want you to move closer to us. Maybe even into the small guest house behind our home. It's completely separate, your own space, but close enough so you'll be part of our daily life. We want Noah to grow up with you. We want you there. Always." The offer stunned me. "Daniel, are you sure?" He nodded quickly. "Yes, I know I don't deserve your trust yet, but I want to earn it. I want to make things right. And having you near us feels right." He paused, then added, "I don't want to lose you again." Emotion rose in my throat. I had lived alone for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be wanted, truly wanted, not out of obligation, but love. I agreed, though I insisted we wait a few months so they could finalize everything. Daniel hugged me again, relieved and grateful. Life became gentler after that conversation. Emily and I went shopping together for baby clothes, for new kitchen items, for small decorative pieces for the guest house. She treated me like family, not like a burden she had once wanted to keep away. Sometimes, she reached for my hand as we walked through stores, a gesture that reminded me of a bond between a mother and daughter, something I never thought I would have. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft shades of gold and pink, I sat in my living room holding Noah while Daniel and Emily prepared dinner. Noah giggled as I traced little circles on his cheek. His laughter sounded like bells, pure and innocent. Emily came out of the kitchen with flour on her apron and said, "He loves you so much. Every time he sees you, he lights up." Daniel nodded proudly. "He knows who his grandmother is." I smiled at them, a warm, full smile I hadn't felt in so long. In that moment, surrounded by the people who once broke my heart but were now mending it piece by piece, I realized the magnitude of what love can rebuild when people are truly willing. Dinner that night felt like a dream. We laughed, teased, shared stories, planned future trips, imagined Noah's first birthday, even joked about how he might be the most spoiled child in the family. I felt whole again. A week later, Daniel and Emily surprised me with a small gathering in my honor. They invited close friends, neighbors, and family members. There were balloons, a table full of food, and a banner that read, "Welcome to a new beginning." I didn't expect such a gesture, but when Daniel stood in front of everyone and cleared his throat, I knew something emotional was coming. "My mother and I went through a rough chapter," he said, looking at me with genuine affection. "I made mistakes so big I didn't think I deserved forgiveness. But she gave me a chance. She gave us all a chance. And I want to say this publicly. I'm proud to be her son." The room erupted in applause. I covered my mouth, overwhelmed by emotion. Daniel walked over and hugged me, and the room blurred behind tears I wasn't ashamed to shed. Emily joined us, placing Noah in my arms. "You're the heart of this family," she whispered. In that moment, surrounded by love, laughter, and a future full of promise, I knew the story had finally reached the ending I had once thought impossible. A happy ending, not perfect, but real, not without pain, but stronger because of it. A family broken and rebuilt. A mother finally loved the way she should have been all along. A son who learned humility and truth. A daughter-in-law who grew in compassion. And a little baby who brought everyone together and reminded us what love can heal. I kissed Noah's forehead softly, whispering a silent promise to him, that I would always be here, that I would always love him, and that no matter how life changed, this family would remain whole. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it with all my heart.